My brother's wedding was meant to be a picture-perfect day, the kind that gets immortalized in photo albums and passed down in family stories. An elegant ceremony under string lights, champagne bubbling in flutes, laughter swirling like confetti in the air, and the comforting warmth of family all around. Everyone was dressed to the nines. The venue sparkled like a dream, and my brother looked happier than I'd ever seen him. I was proud of him, genuinely. As his older sibling, I'd always watched out for him. And that day, I was determined to push my own worries aside, to soak in the happiness. Earlier that morning, I had finally received my long-awaited year-end bonus, $6,500. That money wasn't for pleasure. It was my ticket out of debt, a sigh of relief I'd been waiting years to breathe. I'd worked late nights, missed holidays, and scrimped on everything from lunch breaks to new shoes, just to reach that number. The second it hit my account, I transferred it to checking, thinking it would be safe for a few days before I made the payment. Safe and sound. That phrase kept echoing in my head, bitter and hollow, because that night, as the dance floor pulsed with music and the wedding photographer wrangled relatives for another round of group photos, I felt a slight buzz in my pocket. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was just another notification or a well-wish. But then it came again, persistent, insistent. I finally pulled my phone out of my jacket. 2 alerts, one showing a $2,000 debit, the second for $4,500. My mind didn't even process it at first, just numbers on a screen. Then the numbers registered. My chest tightened. My smile vanished. A cold, creeping sensation crawled up my spine. I stepped away from the reception, weaving past tables of guests and laughter, my hands already shaking. I found a quiet corner outside, near the valet station, barely noticing the cold night air. With trembling fingers, I opened my banking app, praying it was some kind of error, a glitch, anything that made sense. But there it was. My balance had plummeted to single digits. The entire $6,500 gone. I stood there frozen, staring at the screen as the music from inside felt a million miles away. My thoughts spiraled. Was my account hacked? Did someone steal my phone? I double-checked everything. The transactions weren't random. They weren't from overseas or to a strange vendor. They were transfers, direct ones. And that's when I saw the name, a name that made my stomach turn. Derek, my cousin. Same bloodline, same Thanksgiving table. The same guy who once cried on my shoulder after his last breakup. The same guy who used to borrow $20 and promised to pay it back next week. I recognized the account because I'd once sent him money through a transfer app when he claimed he couldn't afford rent. I remember thinking he was struggling, trying his best. That memory made it worse. That made it personal. I felt sucker punched, like the wind had been knocked out of me. Rage, confusion, betrayal, they all hit me at once. But I didn't want to ruin the night for my brother, not yet. So I swallowed my fury, tucked away my shaking hands, and forced myself to walk back into that ballroom, pretending everything was okay, smiling for the camera, clapping for the speeches. But deep down, I knew something had just shifted forever. Something was broken, not just trust, but a bond I never thought could be violated. And as I glanced across the room and saw Derek laughing with a drink in hand, oblivious, shameless, my jaw clenched so tight I could feel it in my neck. He had no idea I knew. Not yet, but I made a silent promise right then. As the music swelled and the lights twinkled overhead, this wasn't over, not by a long shot. As the music faded into the night and the last wedding sparkler fizzled out, I stood there in the ballroom's fading glow, with a smile carved onto my face, like a mask, frozen, hollow, and hiding a storm. My gaze locked on Derek, still laughing, still clinking glasses, completely unaware that I knew everything, the way he moved so casually through the crowd, celebrating a union of love, while he, in the same breath, shattered a bond built over decades. We weren't just cousins. We were practically raised as brothers. We'd scraped knees together, gotten grounded for the same mischief, shared secrets in tree houses and bunk beds. I used to defend him when he got caught stealing cigarettes from the gas station, or when he blew his paycheck on poker games. He was always just going through a phase, always misunderstood, and we always forgave him, because that's what family does, right? But that night, I finally saw the truth behind the smile. At the wedding, Derek had been extra talkative, unusually touchy, and clingy in a way that made my skin itch in hindsight. He kept asking weird questions like, "You still banking with the same app?" Or, "Where's your phone? Don't lose it tonight." I laughed it off at the time. I thought he was being his usual self, nosy, loud, borderline annoying. But now, I saw the pattern for what it really was. He'd been casing me like a target, eyeing my movements, waiting for the moment I slipped, and I had. I'd left my phone on the table while dancing, just for a few minutes, but that was all it took. The next morning, tired but still simmering beneath the surface, I marched into my bank. My hands were cold, my jaw locked tight. I sat across from a teller I didn't know, explaining what I'd seen in my account, hoping, begging, for a miracle explanation. But there wasn't one. The money had been transferred directly. Through my device, I remember sitting there, staring at the screen in the bank's sterile lighting, trying to understand how someone I loved could violate me so cleanly, so intentionally. I called Derek. My heart was pounding so hard, I could hear it in my ears. He picked up on the second ring, his voice smooth, casual. When I told him what I knew, what the bank confirmed, he laughed. Not nervous laughter, not confused laughter, mocking laughter. "You seriously think I'd do that to you? We're family," he said. That word, family, hit me like a slap. He used it like a shield, a weapon, as if being blood gave him immunity. That's when something inside me snapped. That word no longer meant safety or trust. It meant danger, deceit, exploitation. And suddenly, everything made sense. Why Derek always landed on his feet. Why people let him off the hook. Why no one ever held him accountable. Because he hid behind that word. Family, but not me. Not anymore. I reported it to the police, clinging to a shred of hope. I gave them everything. The transaction logs, screenshots, even his account number. They listened, nodded, and at the end of it all, they told me there wasn't enough evidence. No camera footage, no fingerprints, no smoking gun. They called it a civil matter. Like this betrayal was just another paperwork problem. I walked out of that station more broken than before. Not just because my money was gone, but because I realized the system wouldn't protect me. Not from him, not from anyone like him. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. Memories of us as kids flashing through my mind. Birthday parties, sleepovers, secrets whispered in the dark. And now, this. A line had been crossed that could never be uncrossed. He had taken something more than money. He took my trust, my peace, my dignity. But if the system wouldn't serve justice, I would. That night, as the city hummed outside my window, and the silence of betrayal rang loud in my ears, I made myself a promise. Not out of rage, but out of resolve. I would not let this go. I would not let him walk away unscathed. I wasn't just going to get revenge. I was going to make sure he never forgot the name of the person he stole from. If justice wouldn't come to me, I'd become justice. If justice wouldn't come to me, I'd become justice. And I meant it with every fiber of my being. But revenge, true, satisfying, soul-settling revenge, had to be crafted, not screamed. It had to be served cold, calculated, and with precision. So I didn't storm into Derek's apartment or confront him in a blaze of fury. For weeks, I wore a mask so perfect, even I started to believe it. I smiled when he called, acted confused when he brought up the incident, and even pretended to be relieved when I told him, "The bank thinks it might just be a glitch." He laughed. Of course he did. And that laugh only fueled me more. While he thought he'd gotten away with it, I became obsessed with every detail of his life. I tracked his movements online, studied his habits, watched what he posted and what he bragged about. And Derek, he was flaunting every dollar he'd stolen like it was a trophy. Suddenly, he had a brand new 72-inch flat screen mounted to his wall, the kind you see in celebrity homes. He posted boomerangs of himself signing paperwork at a luxury dealership, posing with the keys to a brand new car. Not a used model, not a lease. This was the kind of purchase made with arrogance, not responsibility. He topped it off with the cherry on his pathetic little sundae, a Rolex, shining on his wrist, captured in every mirror selfie and tagged "I'm blessed." I felt sick, but I didn't let it show. I let him bask in it, let him feel untouchable, because the higher the pedestal, the harder the fall, and I was going to make sure his fall shattered something. I realized quickly that the thing Derek loved more than money was being admired for having money. His ego was his Achilles heel, and that's exactly where I aimed. So I built a world he couldn't resist. A fake cryptocurrency startup, sleek, modern, dripping with tech bro language, and just enough buzzwords to look legit. I gave it a flashy name, bought a domain, built a fake website with fake investor profiles and fake testimonials. But I didn't stop there. I used a mutual friend, someone Derek didn't know I was close with, as my inside man. I spun a story about how this startup was exploding, how early investors were already seeing triple returns. I hired an actor, sharp suit, perfect hair, smooth voice, to play the founder in video calls and polished social media posts. The illusion was perfect. All I needed was Derek to bite. And oh, he bit. Hard. I still remember the first time he texted our mutual friend about it. "Yo, what's the buy-in?" He thought he was being slick, playing the game. Little did he know, he was already checkmated. He showed up to the first investor mixer in a button-down shirt with his Rolex flashing in the sunlight, thinking he belonged. I watched from afar, anonymous behind the scenes, as he smiled for the camera, trying to look powerful, trying to belong to a world he didn't even know was fake. His greed was written all over him. It was in the way he bragged about his real estate goals, how he wanted to diversify his portfolio, how he said he was looking for ground floor opportunities. He was trying to convince everyone he was rich, but mostly he was trying to convince himself. And while he flexed, while he soaked in the illusion of success, I was quietly laying the final pieces of the trap. All I needed was his signature, one fake contract, one fraudulent agreement, just enough bait for him to hand over what he thought would multiply his stolen wealth. He didn't know the company wasn't real. He didn't know the contract was designed to implode. He didn't know I had already planned how it would unravel. And he definitely didn't know that every step he took deeper into my fake world was another nail in his own coffin. Because greed has a scent. And Derek, he reeked of it. From miles away, within just 48 hours after Derek eagerly shook hands with the man I hired to play the charismatic founder of the fake cryptocurrency startup. The trap I had meticulously laid down finally closed on him like a steel noose. He wired a massive $10,000 of what he arrogantly thought was easy money directly into the bogus company's account, his greed blinding him completely to the fact that he was stepping into a trap crafted just for him. The audacity of his actions was staggering. He wasn't just spending the $6,500 he stole from me. He was doubling down, throwing even more of what wasn't his into this web of deceit. And all the while, I watched from the shadows, the calm eye in the storm, as he foolishly bragged about his supposed investment and mocked me with that same cocky smirk that had fueled his betrayal from the beginning. I remember his voice vividly, dripping with arrogant superiority when he said, "Man, you should really stop working so hard. There's easier money out there." How little he knew, how painfully ironic those words would sound soon enough. Once I confirmed the funds had landed safely, I struck like a viper. The website I'd painstakingly built with fake profiles, professional designs, and carefully scripted testimonials was taken offline with a click, gone in the blink of an eye. The phone number Derek had been obsessively calling to get updates, disconnected. The address of the so-called company office, just a rented co-working space I had vacated hours earlier, cleaned so thoroughly there was no trace left. No desks, no computers, no sign of a business. Derek was left grasping at nothing. The rage that erupted in him was a hurricane. His phone rang off the hook with frantic calls to anyone he thought could help. He threatened lawsuits, screamed at the air, and sent furious messages demanding answers from the actor who had played the founder. But the actor was long gone, vanished like a ghost, with no forwarding number, no reply, no trace to be found. The fake company was dead before Derek even realized he was being played. But the real kicker, the money, the entire $10,000, was swiftly transferred from the fake account to an account only I controlled. I wasn't just reclaiming the $6,500 stolen from me. I was taking back every cent of the money he foolishly threw at my trap. It was a poetic justice that tasted sweeter than anything I'd imagined. But the story didn't end there. I knew Derek's crime was more than just a personal betrayal. It was part of a larger problem, a symptom of the reckless greed and financial abuse that traps so many people in cycles of pain and loss. So I decided to turn his greed into something meaningful. I took the extra $3,500, the money he thought was just easy cash, and donated it to a charity dedicated to helping young people escape financial abuse and rebuild their lives. It was my way of turning darkness into light, of making sure Derek's selfishness didn't just hurt me, but instead helped heal others. Every step of the sting, the fake website launch, the investor mixers, Derek's calls, the wiring of funds, and the eventual collapse was recorded with painstaking detail. I captured every smug message, every self-congratulatory boast, every threat and denial he made. Not because I wanted to gloat, but because I knew that when the time came to confront him with the truth, I needed ironclad proof that would leave no room for lies or doubt. The moment came when I finally shared the evidence with Derek. There was no yelling, no screaming, just cold, hard facts laid out in front of him. The shock in his eyes was undeniable. The realization that he had been outsmarted by the person he thought was the victim. The sting wasn't just financial. It was a total unraveling of the web he'd spun around himself. Watching him realize that his greed and betrayal had led him straight into a trap was a moment I'll never forget. But beyond the personal victory, what struck me most deeply was a lesson far greater than money or revenge. Betrayal cuts deep, but the strength to rise after being broken cuts deeper. I had reclaimed my dignity and justice in a way the law never could. Derek learned that being family isn't an excuse to cross someone. There are consequences for every betrayal. And sometimes, justice isn't served by the system. It's served by those brave enough to take it. The sting wasn't just my revenge. It was a message to anyone who thinks they can get away with destroying trust and stealing from those closest to them. No one is untouchable. No lie goes unanswered, and no betrayal is forgotten. As I watched Derek's empire of illusions crumble, I finally felt free, not because I had won the money back, but because I had taken back my power. The night I executed the sting, I realized something profound. Revenge is not about hatred or destruction, but about reclaiming what's rightfully yours and using your pain to fuel your strength. And that's exactly what I did. After the sting had unraveled Derek's smug sense of security and left him grasping at shadows, I knew that the hardest part of my revenge was yet to come. The initial hit was just the prelude. The real power lay in the final blow, the one that would shatter what little confidence and pride he had left. I waited, letting the silence stretch, watching the slow erosion of his bravado over the next 2 weeks. I watched him twitch nervously whenever his phone rang, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal when people asked about his failed investment. It was in those quiet, desperate moments that I knew my plan had worked perfectly. Then, without any warning or explanation, I sent him a USB flash drive, cold and simple, with only 2 words scrawled on the case in black marker. Remember me. No letter, no message, no threats, just the device itself, a silent hammer poised to strike. I imagined him holding it, the flicker of fear in his eyes, before curiosity took over, compelling him to plug it into his computer. What he found inside would change everything. The drive was a vault of truth. Videos, screenshots, and recordings that exposed his betrayal in brutal clarity. First, there was the footage of Derek's face, unmistakable and candid, caught on camera transferring the stolen money from my account into the fake investment fund. His smug grin, his careless attitude, all frozen forever in high definition. Undeniable proof that he was the thief. Then came the detailed transaction logs, showing every move of the stolen $6,500 and the additional $3,500 he foolishly wired to me in his greed. Each dollar was accounted for, tracing a trail that led directly back to him without any chance for denial. I included videos of his social media boasts, those Instagram stories where he flaunted his new luxury purchases, the flat-screen TV, the shiny new car, all bought with money he never earned, money that was stolen from me, from family. The sheer arrogance of those clips, now documented as part of my evidence, was the bitterest pill to swallow. But the most damning evidence was saved for last. His own voice, recorded during the fake investment meeting, where he casually admitted to coming into some easy money and joked about not planning to pay taxes on it. It was the confession that no lawyer could deny and no jury could ignore. I held all the power, all the proof needed to destroy him publicly, and I made sure he knew it. When I finally reached out, I gave Derek a choice, a chance to do the right thing, even if only out of fear. I told him simply, You return every cent of my original $6,500. Or I release this footage to the IRS, your fiancé, and your employer. The message was clear. This wasn't just about money. It was about his reputation, his relationships, and his future. Derek, a man who lived for respect and status, was now faced with the real possibility of losing everything. The silence on his end was deafening. But I didn't waver. I watched the clock tick, knowing that the weight of this threat was crushing him slowly. Within hours, the money was back in my account. Every cent. Not because Derek suddenly had a conscience, but because fear of public disgrace outweighed any illusion of innocence he once held. He paid up, swallowed his pride, and vanished into the background. A man broken not just financially, but emotionally and socially. What I gave him wasn't just money, it was a mirror reflecting his own betrayal back at him, magnified by the helplessness, the humiliation, and the bitterness I had felt. It was a reckoning he couldn't escape, a lesson carved into his life with precision. But beyond personal revenge, this was a message to everyone watching that trust isn't a given, and betrayal among family comes with consequences far beyond what the law can always enforce. I had turned the tables not with violence or anger, but with intelligence, patience, and resolve. The real victory was in reclaiming my dignity and proving that strength comes from resilience, not from bitterness. The story ended not with hatred, but with empowerment. I was no longer a victim in Derek's story. I was the force that changed the ending. This final blow was my declaration that justice can be crafted, even when the system fails you, and that sometimes the greatest power lies in standing your ground, gathering your strength, and making sure the truth is known. Derek's greed cost him everything: his money, his pride, and the respect of those around him. And for me, I reclaimed more than stolen cash. I reclaimed my life, my honor, and my future. This is the true meaning of revenge. Not destruction, but rebirth, rising stronger from the ashes of betrayal, ready to face whatever comes next, with a heart unbroken and a spirit unshaken.